Hi, I'm Shao. A viewer of this channel asked me to look at the Voigtländer 40mm f2 and to evaluate again its character, its type of rendering in comparison to other options for the Z mount in a similar focal length. Now, just to show you the borders of the scale, unfortunately I do not have a flat 40mm lens. However, I do have a very modern clinical 50mm lens, which is filming me right now. This is the Nikon 50mm f1.8S. It's a very well corrected modern lens. It's nearly apochromatic in its design. The chromatic aberrations are very well controlled. It has almost no astigmatism. It represents a wide swath of lenses made in recent years. As I said, those are very well corrected lenses optically. They are very sharp. They are made to resolve the whole resolution of those modern high megapixel sensors. And this lens is no exception. Perhaps you can tell from the image you see right now just how contrasty it is, how sharp, how accurately small details are portrayed. This is the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2 in the M mount. It's a typical rangefinder lens. It's rather small for its specifications. Now, this lens is also made for all full-frame mirrorless mounts. Nikon, Sony, Canon. Not sure about the L mount, but it is also made for the Fuji X mount. This lens is a manual lens. It has no autofocus, and it is thus a whole different beast in its usability. It is made quite nicely. It's all metal and glass. However, its main feature, advantage if you will, is the image it produces. It is supposed to be a more traditional image with a little bit of chromatic aberration here and there, especially towards the corners of the image, especially wide open. And the images it makes are less detailed, less contrasty, and more poppy, more dimensional, if you will. But does it really achieve that? This is what we are here to test. This lens doesn't contain any ED elements which are detrimental to pop. They promote resolution, the contrast, but they also flatten the image. It makes the glass less resistant to light. I should put it this way. So the image you get is very clean, as you can tell from the image you see now on your screen. On the other end of the scale, we have retro lenses that harken back to the 1960s or 50s. Lenses such as this one. This is also a Voigtländer lens. It's the Voigtlander 40mm f1.4 Classic. And it's maybe half the size of the 40mm f1.2, which is more modern. The 40mm f1.4 Classic has a character of its own. It is characterized by low contrast, very heavy vignetting, wide open. In my opinion, it is not supposed to be shot at f1.4. It is rather soft at this wide aperture. Let me show you what it looks like. And I will shoot it at f2, just so we can have a more decent rendering. I'm now shooting on the Voigtlander 40mm f1.4 Classic at f2. Maybe you can already see the difference in rendering. I will put the images side by side. If the 50mm f1.8S is a very modern, very well corrected lens, this might be the opposite. Perhaps you can already appreciate the low contrast. I'm shooting this scene in very flat light. The light is indirectional. It is omnidirectional. It comes from all sides. And at those conditions, the poppy lenses really come into their own. You can perhaps appreciate the poppy, the dimensional rendering. But that comes at the expense of sharpness, of detail, of resolution. This lens, like most Voigtlander lenses I will later show you, contains no low dispersion glass whatsoever. On the other hand, it does contain more high refractive index glass that has some resistance to light. It has a little bit of softening effect, but it's not, this lens is not really soft, especially not as you stop it down a little bit. At f2 it will look quite sharp, I believe, not as sharp as the modern lenses, but it is quite sufficient for a talking head video like this. Let me now mount the lens. This video is dedicated to the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2 and see how it fares in this scale of rendering. The lens shooting me now is the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2 itself. I'll put this section of the video side by side with both 50mm Nikon and Voigtlander 40mm Classic. So you can judge which lens it's closer to. I think it's somewhere right in the middle, which is a good thing. Here at f2, it compares quite well in its sharpness to the Nikon 50mm, a modern, corrected clinical lens. But in its pop, in its dimensionality, in the way it portrays textures, structures in the scene, and in the way it preserves the three-dimensional appearance of a scene as we experience it with our own eyes. It looks quite true to life, much like the 40mm f1.4 Classic. This lens is optically better. Again, wide open, it's a little bit softer. It has slightly glowy highlights. It is quite susceptible to flare if you put a source of light in the frame or just outside of it. But at f2 and up, it becomes much cleaner without compromising too much on its dimensionality. The Voigtländer 40mm f1.2 is made of 8 elements in 6 groups, no ED elements whatsoever, which makes it reminiscent in its build, in its structure, to typical double Gaussian lenses made in the 1970s, 80s and 90s. Out of all manual lenses, modern ones made for mirrorless mounts, it is perhaps the most popular. Of course, the f1.2 aperture gives its owner some bragging rights. f1.2 is, of course, very good for low light. It might promote subject separation, although 40mm as a normal focal length is rarely used to achieve this effect, which is a little bit overused, I feel. Let me just open the aperture up and I'll show you what it looks like wide open. Right, now I'm shooting the lens at f1.2. At this aperture, it appears a little bit softer. The vignetting becomes much stronger. It shows more chromatic aberration if you enlarge the view on your computer screen. Although a typical viewer of a printed image or on a small screen looking at the whole image will never notice it really. The big question is this f1.2 aperture useful, especially on a manual focus lens? And I would like to argue it depends a lot on what you shoot. If you shoot moving subjects of any kind, like I do, the wide aperture is not particularly useful. You see, when shooting with it, you have to dedicate a lot of your creative process to focusing in order to make sure that the subject is really in focus. At f1.2, even on a relatively short focal length, like 40 millimeters, you cannot really trust focus speaking to show you exactly what the focal distance is. So you might experience some missed focus using this method. Instead, you would have to enlarge the image on your screen or in your viewfinder and critically focus. And that is not very conductive to moving subjects, especially not in low light. At f2, things become a little bit easier. This is where you can start trusting focus speaking, and the whole process of focusing the lens becomes easier. At f2.8, you can even start using zone focusing for more distant subjects, especially. And I think this is where this focal length shines in applications such as street photography or general documentary photography. You don't need a very fast aperture. You usually engage in those types of photography in decent light, so you don't really need this wide aperture to ensure the shutter speed is sufficient. Personally, I do use this lens wide open for what I do. For that, I use an autofocusing adapter, the TTArtisan adapter that supports some type of autofocusing. This is slow, but it is highly useful for these situations. When shooting people in low light conditions, where they do not move very fast, but they still breathe, you do need an autofocusing solution to shoot with those wide apertures. Right now, the lens is mounted on such an adapter. So let me show you how it works. See, as I approach the camera, the adapter moves a little bit forward. And when the focal distance increases, the adapter moves a little bit backward. And so it tries to keep me in a sort of focus. This is not an ideal solution for continuous autofocus, but if you need to grab a quick shot with a single autofocus, it will be sufficient. And the autofocus, autofocus will make sure that the image is adequately sharp. In manual focus, though, I feel that this lens is useless for such applications. It will still be rather efficient when you shoot static subjects, or when you have the time to make sure your focus is dialed in correctly. If you want cleaner image with less artifacts, less aberrations, with a better overall sharpness, you better stop the lens down to around f2 at least. However, at f2 or smaller, there are other options. Let me show you what I mean. This lens is the TTArtisan 40mm f2. It's a recent lens, only announced around 6 months ago, and it's available for all mirrorless mounts, apart from Canon, of course. It doesn't allow third-party autofocus lenses. It's an f2 lens, and it has some quirks. It's not the sharpest lens wide open, and it does have one ED element, which makes its rendering a little bit flatter than what you may expect from a lens such as the Voigtländer 40mm f1.2 filming me now. But it's still not a really clinical flat lens. It has some juice in it. Let me mount it on and show you what I mean. The lens shooting me now is this TTArtisan 40mm f2, wide open at f2. As you can see at f2, its rendering is somewhere in the middle. I would argue its level of detail and also its level of pop are comparable to the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2, which is a very good thing. This lens is a lot cheaper than the Voigtlander. It's a plastic lens, and it is not built to the same high quality as the Voigtlander, but it supports autofocusing, which is a great advantage, especially if you like using it for moving subjects. The autofocus is not the fastest in the world, but it's a lot better than the Voigtlander adapted to that TTArtisan autofocusing adapter. It works almost as well as native autofocus on a first-party lens. As I said before, very wide apertures on a manual focus lens, unless it's a very wide one, which 40mm is not, is not really useful for moving subjects. A solution like this might be much preferable if you want to make your life easier and increase your keeper rate. This TTArtisan 40mm f2 is still not my favorite lens for the Z mount at this focal length. The title goes to a different one. This is the Nikon 40mm f2, which is a very cheaply built lens. It doesn't even have a metal mount. But it is rather poppy. It is even poppier than this lens, and the TTArtisan and the Voigtlander f1.2. Though I'm not sure in a side-by-side you will be able to tell the difference. It needs a lot more shooting with to really learn and appreciate the rendering of the Nikon 40mm f2. Let me mount it on the camera and I'll show you what it looks like. The lens shooting me now is the Nikon Z 40mm f2. And as I said, it's perhaps my favorite 40mm made for the Z mount. It's quite different from other modern lenses. Lenses such as the Sony 40mm f2.5 and the Viltrox version are quite modern. They are made with maximum resolving power in mind. This lens is different. It is made with no ED glass. It has only 6 elements arranged in 4 groups, which makes it rather poppy. And this pop is not only apparent wide open, like I'm shooting this lens now, but also as you stop it down. It is not really distinguishable on first view from lenses such as the TTArtisan 40mm f2 or the Voigtländer 40mm f1.2. But I believe it is quite a bit nicer than lenses such as this Nikon 50mm f1.8. That is a very sharp clinical lens. So my conclusion is if you shoot the Nikon Z mount, you might save yourself a lot of money by buying this lens, the 40mm f2. If you shoot any other mount except Canon, you could go for the TTArtisan 40mm f2 and save even more compared to that lucrative Voigtlander 40mm f1.2. The wider aperture is only useful in some cases, especially in very low light, especially for static subjects, unless you have an autofocusing solution, which is of questionable effectiveness. Anyway, I think that very wide aperture on manual lenses are somewhat overrated. They're not very useful. They're certainly not very convenient. And they will slow you down and make you concentrate on the task of focusing the lens much more than necessary. Most of all, I think that the rendering of those 3 lenses, the TTArtisan f2, the Voigtlander 40mm f1.2, and the Nikon Z 40mm f2 shooting me now, are indistinguishable unless you really try to see small differences. A typical viewer will not be able to tell which lens you shot with. And they're all a little bit nicer and a little bit poppier than your typical modern lens, which is a good thing. On the other hand, they are not as characterful as lens such as this one, the 40mm f1.4 Classic, which to me is really the best 40mm lens. But I accept that not many people really like this dense, low contrast look. Right, I think I've talked enough for one video. If you like my channel, if you found this video or other videos on my channel helpful or interesting in any way, please consider buying me a coffee. It's a nice gesture between gentlemen. You will find the link in the description below. So, thank you for watching and see you again soon.